All right, now our speaker for today is someone who is very special, one of the co-founders of this very community, here from the very beginning, who's also a licensed Unity teacher. And for those of you who don't know what a licensed Unity teacher means, it means somebody who knows almost as much as the minister. Okay, so she said, should I just go up? And I said, no, I get to take my shot here. So come on, Therese Solimeno.
Are we on? Actually, the licensed Unity teacher is someone who knows as much as the minister, but has some humility not to share it all. So some of you don't know this, but I actually was the last speaker to speak here 16 months ago to a group of about, I'd say, 8 people, and that included myself, Brian, the guy working and the musician. So as I was saying, so a couple of months ago, actually, I guess it's more recently than that, I was in my pandemic phase of watching whatever there was to watch on Netflix and came across a movie called Collateral Beauty. Has anybody heard or seen this movie? It was made in about 5 years ago, and so it's fairly recent, and it starred, well, it has this amazing cast, Will Smith and Kate Winslet and Helen Mirren and Edward Norton and anyway, just, I don't know why I hadn't heard about this movie, but in it, it starts off and we see Will Smith, and he is the genius head of a New York advertising agency. And he is addressing his staff at this big celebration party, and everybody's up and he's full of energy, and he comes out and he says, everything in advertising can be attributed to 3 things: death, love, and time. And I worked in advertising for many years before I switched over to events, and I thought, I'm not sure where I see that in a commercial for Wheaties, but okay, let's go with it. And they established the character within 3 minutes of being this dynamic, vibrant, talented young man. The next scene is 3 years later. And we find out that 2 years prior, his 6-year-old daughter had died from an unexpected medical illness. And he is a broken man. He still comes to the office, but he's not really there. And he spends all of his time creating these elaborate, I'm not sure what you call them, but those things you make with dominoes, where you build this thing with dominoes and then you just flick one and they just kind of spread out everywhere, right? And that's all he does. And the partners in the ad agency are beside themselves because 1, they miss their friend. They feel bad for their friend, but 2, their business is going down because he was the key contact for most of their big clients. So they don't really know what to do. And at some point in his anger and his frustration, he writes a letter to death, to time, and to love, and he just reads them right. So the jumping off point for the plot of this movie is that they find out about this and they get these letters, and they use these letters as a means to try to jolt this man back into his life. And somewhere in there, and I'm getting to why this is called Collateral Beauty, he joins a grief group, although he will not speak. He just sits there. But one of the people in the grief group, it's a grief group for parents who have lost their children. And this woman says, I was sitting in the hospital and I was, it was clear the end was near for my daughter. And this stranger came up and said to me, remember, in the middle of all of this, to look for the collateral beauty. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We usually hear that term associated, or not even that term, but we always hear about collateral damage, right? You thought the same thing. Collateral damage is the unintentional harm that comes to something that wasn't the direct target. But collateral beauty, and I saw as this movie unfolded, and it's a very interesting movie. I would recommend that you watch it. You know, unfortunately, it only got like, I don't know, 16 points on Rotten Tomatoes, or I don't know why. Maybe it was a little too intricate or metaphysical or something, but for the general public. But what collateral beauty is the light in the middle of the most despairing darkness you can experience in life. I see the light. And I was thinking about the different ways we've heard that message before. You know, we've heard that message before, but I've never looked at it as looking for the beauty. And it became evident, what brought it to mind as the subject for this talk is, this building, this condo collapsed in Miami. And horrible, devastating. I mean, just the worst thing, one of the worst things that you can imagine. And we have been through a year of pretty bad things. But I read an interview with a man whose parents lived in that building. And he said that he feels such gratitude because that night he and his wife had dinner with them. And mom made all of his favorite foods, and it was just this wonderful visit. And they go to bed. And the other thing that he was grateful for is that they died together. Because he said after 60 some odd years of marriage, their greatest fear was what happens when one of us goes first. And so his collateral beauty in that horrible experience was what he considered a blessing. So I wanted to remind us, because we know this, we've heard this message over and over and over again. I don't want to call it positive thinking, but I want to call it finding the light in the middle of the darkness, that it's always there. There's always something in the middle of this, anything that you're experiencing, that will uplift you, that will remind you of the love and the light and the lessons that we need to learn. I was also thinking about, many years ago, we had a miniature schnauzer, Molly, and she was energetic, and she was bright, and she was very opinionated, as most miniature schnauzers are. And we discovered unexpectedly that she had diabetes, and not only that, but within 3 weeks of that, she went completely blind. Her retina's detached. And I got the word of this at work. The vet's office called me after they did their test, whatever. And I was so distraught over this. I mean, my beautiful, vibrant, and I went out to my car and I just cried and cried and cried. I mean, deep sobs. I don't have any children, so my pets are my children. And I was so racked with guilt. Why didn't we see this? Why didn't we notice the symptoms? Why didn't we get her treated sooner? Why? Why didn't we notice this sooner? And I went home and I looked at her and I thought, I know why. Because she adapted so well that she wasn't hiding it. She was just like, okay, well, and she could be in the living room and walk to the hallway, make a right turn without bumping into anything, go down the hall, make another turn, go out the doggy door that was in the back bedroom, go outside on the patio, go down this walkway that was the width of maybe a sidewalk, go outside, do her thing, whatever, and reverse it and come back and go, where's my treat? And in the middle of what I thought was probably one of the most heartbreaking experiences I would ever experience on behalf of my animal, she taught me great resilience and what happens when we adapt, when we adapt. So the collateral beauty is everywhere around us. And we know this. We know this instinctively. Now, not only are we responsible for finding our own light in the middle of darkness, we are also enabled to show that to other people. And I know that because that's part of our ability, and that's probably part of our responsibility based on the prayer of St. Francis. Everybody here know the prayer of St. Francis? By the way, the original was, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. But the thing is that in metaphysics, it's I am. I already am. Nobody has to make me anything. I am an instrument of God's peace. So where there is hatred, I so love. So I'm gonna do this as an affirmation. Okay. Repeat after me, please. Where there is hatred, I so love. Where there is doubt, I show faith. Where there is injury, I bestow pardon. Where there is despair, I sow hope. And where there is darkness, I bring light. Where there is sadness, I bring joy. That is our collateral beauty. That is the ability that we can bring to any possible situation. Now, have I experienced the absolute devastation like in the movie or any of that stuff? Not related to anybody else, but my experience is not like anybody else's, neither is yours. We all use that to our own ability and our own capacity for what is or isn't good or bad. Good or bad are such relative terms that, you know, to the man who lost his parents, yes, it's terrible that they died, but it was great that they died together. Somebody else would not think that at all. You know, it's terrible my dog went blind, but what an amazing gift she gave us by watching what happens when you adapt to your circumstance. So we know that in the midst of anything that happens to us, even if there seems like there's absolutely nothing we can do to change our circumstances, what's the one thing we can do? Change our attitude, change our point of view about it. Find the one thing in there that is the light in the darkness of this time. Years ago, I remember listening to a tape by, who's that self-help guru, Anthony, Tony Robbins. And he was talking about how the difference between possibility thinking and positive thinking. And he says, positive thinking is when you look at a patch of flowers and you say, I don't see the weeds, I don't see the weeds, I don't see the weeds. But possibility thinking is when you look at that patch full of flowers that have the weeds and you go, I see the weeds. Let's pull those suckers out and let's see what we can do about making this beautiful garden. And I think I inherently do that more and more as I get older. Well beyond the days of my psycho marketing bitch from hell label. I hope I am beyond that. Although my positive thinking does come out in, or my possibility thinking comes out in sarcasm at times, like, and I've mentioned this before, in 1991, when we started the Desert Storm War against Iraq, my sister, who was a fundamentalist born-again Christian, called me in great fear and despair and said, oh my God, I think this is the beginning of the 7-year war that was foretold in Revelation. And I said, well, it'd be a great time to take out a 30-year loan, wouldn't it? There is a story that is attributed to Ronald Reagan, the most optimistic, shining city on the hill public figure we've had probably in the last 50 years. And the story goes that a reporter asked him what an optimist was. And he said, an optimist is someone who opens a door and finds a room full of horse manure and says, there must be a pony in here somewhere. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. So I recommend you watch this movie. It's absolutely fascinating. By the way, I found it interesting, just as an aside, that death, time, and love were quite prevalent in the pandemic as well. Death, that's pretty obvious. I mean, we had over 600,000 deaths here, and that was something that we were fighting against tooth and nail, right? And the reports were always either about how many people were dead or what types of physical conditions would more likely lead to death. I mean, death was very much a motivating factor for what happened during the pandemic. Time. The pandemic was all about time. When is it going to get here? How long are we going to be in quarantine? How long more are we going to be in quarantine? When is the vaccine going to come out? Okay, time. But what was the one prevailing thing in the pandemic that I saw? It was love. It was love. I saw that. I saw that in how even if someone had their doubts about the effectiveness of the mask, they wore it anyway because they didn't want to infect someone else. I saw it we all saw it in the work of the frontline workers who didn't have to be there. They didn't have to be there, but they were there and they were holding hands and they were holding up iPads so that loved ones could communicate in this horrible situation. And it was there when at 7 o'clock every night, the city of New York or the city of Chicago or any city anywhere would spontaneously give out a round of applause for anybody that were the frontline workers. That the human spirit wants to endure. Love wants to endure. As a complete aside, anybody here ever watched the show Monk, TV show Monk? Did you see the thing about Mr. Monk and the coronavirus? Mr. Monk and the coronavirus. Look it up on YouTube. It is probably one of the most hilarious things you'll ever see. I mention it because at the end of that video, it happens to be 7 o'clock in New York City. And he says, I'm going to go out on the balcony now and I'm going to go applaud for the fun. We got through that, not just because of the perseverance and the stay-at-home orders and all the other stuff we got there. We got there because we were all looking for that light in the middle of the darkness, and we shared it with each other. You know, we shared it anytime we could. If we could buy food for our neighbor, we did. If we could take someone to the doctor, we did. That is what humans do. That is what the spirit does. That is who we are. So in closing, I just want to remind you, look for the collateral beauty, no matter what happens in your life. Look for the pony. Because I open a lot of those doors and I see a lot of that other stuff, and I'm always looking for the pony. And it's just so wonderful to see you all. Sadie, it's so great to see you. And everybody online, thank you for joining us today. And I say namaste, thank you.